16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Unsuspecting friends? Check. Epic water displacement? Big check. A work of art that's only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events. They'll keep Greg active, involved, and mischievous, and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Diane Hall, and I am AARP's Community Outreach Director for AARP in Kansas City. And I'm really happy that you are able to join us this morning for AARP's virtual tour of the American Jazz Museum. Today, we're going to have a live presentation, and we'll take a virtual tour of the American Jazz Museum, then have a Q&A session with staff, take a tour around Kansas City's 18th and Vine Jazz District, and end with some live jazz from the Mutual Musicians Foundation. AARP Missouri is pleased to bring you this live virtual event. Here at AARP Missouri, we celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion every day of the year. As part of AARP's mission, we work to enhance the lives of all people, families. We have resources and information online at aarp.org/mo, and we have activities and events at aarp.org/near-you. And you can learn about volunteering with AARP at aarp.org/volunteer. Our efforts to help people live their best lives include many things. Virtual options like this one for caregivers who may face challenges with in-person events, resources for protecting yourself against fraud through online information or local shred events, and working on livable communities that goes well beyond housing and transportation to include social participation that virtual events like this offer. As I mentioned, at AARP Missouri, we celebrate diversity, equity, inclusion every day of the year, and African American Music Month is coming up in June, and Juneteenth is coming up June 19th. So if you're in the Kansas City area, we hope to see you at our Juneteenth celebration in our city's 18th and Vine District on June 15th. AARP is going to have a booth at the city's Juneteenth celebration, and our booth is going to be in the Jazz Museum, so please stop by and see us. Now, before we get started, let me remind you to use the Q&A function to ask questions as the tour goes along so we can get responses for what you want to know. Make sure you stick around to the end because we will be listening to some live jazz and sharing information about discounts at the American Jazz Museum. Now I'd like to introduce James McGee, the American Jazz Museum's Senior Manager of Visitor and Virtual Experience. Welcome, James.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to be here with you all.
Well, James, it's good to see you again. It's been a while since we've done a virtual tour, and some of our audience may have been with us before and have come back for more of the fantastic jazz and things from the museum. But for those of our audience who have not been with us before and maybe not as familiar with museum, could you share a little bit about what the American Jazz Museum's history is and some of its mission?
Yeah, well, the American Jazz Museum was opened in September 7. So last year we celebrated our 25th anniversary, and it was really done out of a need to identify and honor the heritage and culture of Kansas City, which is so steeply represented by jazz music, especially in the 18th and Vine area. So the museum was done as part of the overall development for the district in that whole plan to honor the culture and heritage and the socioeconomic opportunities it would provide as well. So that's a little bit of the history of the American Jazz Museum. However, when we talk about Kansas City and jazz, the American Jazz Museum is just that place that is the hub or the epicenter where all of these artifacts, stories, and narratives are stored for us to be able to preserve and present to the next generation.
And if you haven't been to Kansas City and you do visit us, or if you're in Kansas City and you've not been down to the 18th and Vine District, you should absolutely go. Thank you, James, for that little snippet. I know you're going to talk more about 18th and Vine here in a little bit, but people are really here to see the American Jazz Museum and listen to the jazz. So I'm going to switch the spotlight over to you. and let you take everybody on a little tour of the American Jazz Museum.
All right. Sounds good. Well, as Diane mentioned, I am James McGee, Senior Manager of Strategic Community Partnerships and Events here at the American Jazz Museum. It's great to have you here. Hope you learned something today, and we'll have some Q&A sections, so you'll have time to ask questions. And I just hope you see you here soon in person one day. All right. So where I'm at right now is the historic Blue Room. This is known as one of the top jazz clubs in the country at this time, but it is paying homage to the Blue Room bar and grill that was in the Streets Hotel, which is on 18th and Vine. So this was a replica that we made to kind of pay honor and homage to that historic space. We are in 18th and Vine, which is historically an African American community. And at the time that the Streets Hotel was in existence, that's where many of the Black travelers, Black athletes, and celebrities actually had to stay because of the segregation laws and rules. So the Blue Room is a very special place to be here at the American Jazz Museum. This is where we have live jazz on a weekly basis. If you're ever here on a Monday night, Thursday night, or Friday night, you need to come and hang out and experience our Blue Room jazz and jam sessions. So if you follow me here this way, we'll go up to what is one of my favorite pieces in the American Jazz Museum. And it's really the part that dives deep into the Kansas City influence and history in 18th and Vine and jazz music as a whole. So this within the Blue Room is a display. I didn't mention that the Blue Room is actually a part of the museum. So it's not like a separate club and then there's the museum. The Blue Room is a functional jazz venue. However, it does have artifacts, information, and material that are considered part of the museum. This has got to be one of my favorite areas in the museum, as I mentioned. This is where we pay homage and give information about Mary Lou Williams, who is one of the first female band leaders and arrangers to really achieve commercial success and respect amongst the male peers that were predominant in jazz. And she started right here in Kansas City. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but made her way to Kansas City to be a part of what we had as a vibrant music scene here, to learn and to grow. And that's what you find out about the history of Kansas City jazz. It was always about bringing on the next generation, passing the torch or lighting the next musician's torch and building on from that. And we continue that legacy. The Blue Devils is mentioned here as well, which was a territorial band based out of Oklahoma. But many of the members found their way here to Kansas City and just kind of made it a home. So it became like the official headquarters of the Blue Devils. If you ever have time to go on YouTube, look up a movie, it's about the Mutual Musicians Foundation and the members there. And it's called The Last of the Blue Devils, because those musicians were like the pivotal musicians that kind of transitioned from the New Orleans style of jazz and the Southwest blues style into an actual Kansas City jazz that we know today. The Blue Devils, a lot of them were part of that. We also pay homage and give honor to Kansas City's own Mr. Jay McShann. Born in Oklahoma, but as many artists and musicians came to Kansas City to find his opportunity and to be a part of that thriving music scene and cultural scene. Jay McShann is another one of those musicians who is looked at as one of those teachers that was not only an accomplished musician himself, but contributed to other musicians such as Charlie Parker and Count Basie. A part you're going to see on this tour that is towards the end of the tour that Diane mentioned is the live performance. Well, that live performance is going to take place at the Mutual Musicians Foundation, which was previously known as Local Musicians 627 and was part of the American Federation of Musicians. In this section here of the Blue Room exhibit, we highlight the information, small facts about Local 627. During segregation, Local 627 was located at 1823 Highland, where it still is today, and functioned as the primary meeting spot and jam session, and more importantly, business area where musicians could get fair pay, contract negotiations, and really have representation to make a living. Another fact that people don't really mention when it comes to jazz, and especially Kansas City jazz, is the relationship between blues and jazz and previous African American music. So before the real genre of jazz started to form, you would have more of a blues sound or maybe more of a marching band sound, but very few vocalists. So in comes Big Joe Turner, who you see here displayed with his album Jumpin' the Blues. He was one of the many bouncers and bodyguards that worked the clubs and venues of the Black community in Kansas City, but he was known to have a voice so strong and prominent that he could sing without a microphone, and it was a way that he got patrons into Piney Brown's club. So he started to be able to sing with these larger bands because he got more notoriety as a vocalist as opposed to a bouncer. So Big Joe Turner and Pete Johnson are actually looked at as some of the premier architects of modern day rock and roll because they bring in that boogie woogie style of music with the vocals and also even using the words rockin' and roll 'em like they use in their song Rollin' Pete. So jazz not only has a connection to blues, but to rock and roll and various forms of other contemporary music that were inspired by those musicians of that time. And a lot of them came out of Kansas City. This here is our Kansas City Wall of Fame for jazz musicians. These are the musicians that were known locally and even some nationally, internationally, but may not have received the same critical acclaim and lasting legacy of fame like a Count Basie or Walter Page or Mary Lou Williams. We honor people here such as Josephine Byrd, Gene Carter, Jimmy Rushing, Dorothy Houston, and one of my favorites over here, I don't really get to talk about this a lot. It's right here in the corner. The name of the group is Three Gone Guys. And this is a special picture to me personally because the drummer is my great grandfather. So it's always, I didn't know that until one day I was in here giving a tour to one of my, to my grandfather, and he saw the picture and recognized the band. And my grandfather's a musician as well. So it's interesting to see these things transpire like this. But we're going to make our way into the permanent exhibit, which is the main part of the American Jazz Museum's exhibits. The exhibit in here is based on our 4 jazz masters. That would be Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, and Charlie Parker. So if you're ever here on a tour in person, you'll understand that that's the layout of the permanent exhibit. So those are the 4 pillars that we're honoring, or the 4 jazz legends. So I'll start with one of my favorite composers and arrangers of all time, Mr. Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington was not only known as a jazz musician, but he was really looked at as a accomplished pianist who made well over thousands of arrangements and original compositions. It's also known that when the term jazz started coming about, many of the musicians resisted that, and they just really referred to it as black music. And Duke Ellington himself actually said that he made black classical music, or he was referred to in that way by critics at the time. He is one of the first African Americans to have a U.S. stamp designated after him. And he was just a hugely popular musician and has an interesting story because he came from a fairly well-to-do family and was trained formally and classically. So he came from a very sophisticated part of the African American culture and society, where being a musician wasn't always looked at as the primary or prime job to have, but he was so accomplished that he went on to accomplish what would be a legacy that would live on and influence many, many jazz musicians after that. And an interesting story about Duke Ellington as it relates to our earlier Mary Lou Williams that we discussed. He was one of the first people to hire her as an arranger and composer for his band. They co-wrote many compositions and arrangements together. And Mary Lou Williams was really given the task of being the leader of that band when it came to the arrangements, which wasn't something that was very common during that time. We're going to move on to our second pillar, and these are in no particular order, but they're in placed in priority based on just their position in jazz as a whole and their influence. So next we have Mr. Louis Armstrong. Sorry if I broke out a little bit there. I think I did, but I think we were in a little bit of a bad area. Louis Armstrong was really known as the avid ambassador for jazz music internationally. His personality, his playing style, his singing, his talent all lent to a very affable persona, someone who's well liked, someone who entertains and brings happiness and joy to people, and was really looked at as a serious musician, not only because of his talent and skill, but later on, the U.S. government even saw fit to use Louis Armstrong as an ambassador during World War II to bring relief to the troops and spread a positive American message because he was such an ambassador. Well known for his cornet playing and vocal stylings, Louis Armstrong was just an all-around pop cultural icon at a time when that wasn't very regular as an occurrence. If you follow me this way, one of our most coveted possessions here is a replica of Louis Armstrong's cornet. So people would not understand that there's right under this here, this cornet is this blue solvent. A lot of people don't understand that when Louis Armstrong was getting endorsements and deals with commercial brands, especially white-owned companies, a black man getting that type of deal in business was not really something that was a regular occurrence. It wasn't unheard of, actually. So Louis Armstrong was so influential and famous that brands even began to license his name and likeness to sell products. We see that every day now with different big companies like Pepsi and Coca-Cola, and a lot of black musicians and artists, but that wasn't something that was common, especially in the early 20th century. Just a little background about Louis Armstrong. He was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, August 4th, 1901. Uh, Unlike Duke Ellington, I like to sometimes make the comparison. Louis Armstrong had a pretty rough childhood and upbringing. He was definitely labeled as a juvenile delinquent and had several stints at boys' homes and reformatories. But as they say, sometimes the punishment can be the gift because there's a lesson in it, and that's literally where Louis Armstrong was recruited into the boys' home band and picked up his horn. Had it not been for that, we probably wouldn't have a Louis Armstrong how we have him now. I keep saying all these are some of my most favorite, but this one has definitely got to be something that has occupied a lot of my time here, learning about this artist and this musician, this person, and that's Ella Fitzgerald. One of my most eye-catching items here that get a lot of conversation and interest are Ella Fitzgerald's gown. She was known as a style icon, a pop icon again. As I had mentioned, this is not something that was a regular occurrence, especially during that time. Today, in today's society, we see these as normal occurrences, your Michael Jacksons and all these big, huge people that have acquired this huge fame as an artist. That wasn't as common in that time. So again, to have endorsement deals with American Express and different magazines, and even have a sketch of yourself done by Pablo Picasso because you turned down a dinner engagement with him and some of his friends. Interesting fact that Pablo Picasso's art agent actually created a record label called Pablo just to primarily record and distribute Ella Fitzgerald records. One of her more well-known attributes is her style of scat. She's considered the first lady of song, and scat is a form of vocalization in singing without actually using words. Ella Fitzgerald truly used her voice as an instrument. So she was able to really jam with the musicians and band members because she was able to not be limited by words and stylings of words, but she could actually become one of the instruments. Famously known for songs like A Tisket, a Tasket, and These Are the Blues. Ella went to represent jazz and vocalists and Black America especially as another premier ambassador because of her talent and contributions to the arts. The last area we'll stop in, our fourth jazz master, is Mr. Charlie Parker. Of course, Charlie Parker is known as Kansas City's native son, born in Kansas City, Kansas in 1920. He moved to Kansas City, Missouri when he was about 5 years old. I'll give you a good fun fact when we get to the Mutual Musicians Foundation about Charlie Parker's boyhood home in Kansas City and its relationship to the Mutual Musicians Foundation today. Here we have some of the awards that Charlie Parker received from Downbeat, a pair of custom cufflinks, a pocket watch, and a replica of the Charlie Parker bust and statue that stands behind the American Jazz Museum. If one would consider what was our most prized possession here at the American Jazz Museum, it would have to be a Grafton saxophone that was purchased by then Mayor Emanuel Cleaver at an auction, and it resides as our centerpiece here. This is the saxophone known to be played at one of the greatest jazz concerts that ever occurred, as they say, at Macy Hall in Canada. It was Bud Powell, Charles Mingus, Max Roach, and Dizzy Gillespie. So it is a real treasure of ours to have here. It's actually been around the country a few times at a couple of different displays, last notably at Disney World in Florida, where they had the Soul exhibit, which was a movie that was about a music teacher that was trying to find his purpose. So they added that to the exhibit of Soul, and we had a great Disney exhibit here for about 6 months after that. And it's been back here since then. So that just gives a bit of a walkthrough tour of the permanent exhibit of the American Jazz Museum. I'm going to come into our atrium space, where when you come to the museum is where you're received to either go to the American Jazz Museum or the Negro League Baseball Museum.
I think James is having a little connectivity problem there. We'll get him back in just a second as he gets into the atrium and the signal clears up. I apologize for the technical issue there, but I think they're going to get back online any second now. Remember, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A as James gets his signal back, or at least we hope he gets his signal back. We'll just hang on for just a second and give him a minute to get his connection again, but don't forget to use that Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Here comes James. There we go.
All right. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, James.
Okay. Sorry about that. We had a bit of a pivot there. It's always a blind spot, something going on here. But let's see. Let me get that adjusted here for you all. All right. So sure, this is the time that I have right now for a bit of a Q&A. If you all are interested in asking some questions, Diane, I believe you have the moderator task on this.
I do have the moderator task on this, and hang on one second. Threw me by losing your signal there for a second, James.
Okay.
So, see, we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A right now. Let me open that up. Well, one of the questions is, will there be a recording of this? And yes, there will be a recording of that. I'll just answer that live so that people know that. So one of the questions that we have for you, James, I think you already mentioned when it was founded, but can you talk a little bit more about the movers and shakers who kind of got the American Jazz Museum going?
Yeah, interesting information about that because it was really a community effort from local politicians on down to grassroots leaders here. What really sparked off the interest around that time of actually doing the redevelopment with the area and the Jazz Museum was that there was a movie shot here. I believe it filmed from 1994 to 1996 titled Kansas City. It was a movie about the Kansas City era during the 1930s of Prohibition. Featured gangsters, brothels, jazz musicians, and everything. So they used the 18th and Vine district as a backdrop that was an easy scene to make cinematic. So that is what kind of sparked the interest in redeveloping this area. So at the time, you had the mayor, Emanuel Cleaver, who is actually now Congressman Cleaver, who initiated and spearheaded the project because he was the city council person over the third district at that time. It was able to get the buy-in from the city as well as the citizens about redeveloping this area. So those were a lot of the movers and shakers that were kind of making sure that this happened.
Awesome. I recognize some of those names too. One of the questions we have is someone would love to see both in person, and I assume that means the Jazz Museum and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Can you talk a little bit about the hours and days that you guys are open?
Yeah, we're open Tuesday through Sunday for most of the year. Our hours Monday through Saturday are 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. We do open on Mondays in the summertime. That actually starts next month where we're actually open on Mondays. So we're open 7 days a week starting in June. And the Monday time is not 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. as well.
Is that the same for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum? Do you have the same hours?
Yeah, same hours. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Another question is, do you get any funding? Because it's really important to have that preservation. There's so much history.
Yeah, so the American Jazz Museum is heavily and positively supported by the city of Kansas City, Missouri. It is a city asset, and the artifacts and collection here actually belong to the city. And the American Jazz Museum organization is the managing entity for that organization. So we're tasked with the care of the collections, the artifacts, as well as the venues that we have here, like the Gym Theater, the Atrium, the Blue Room. And then we are also tasked as a non-for-profit for raising funding to support the organization and its mission. So we apply for grants on an annual basis and a quarterly basis, just like any other nonprofit. And we do also have a special great support from our members. You can become a member of the American Jazz Museum. We have different levels and fees. You can find that information on americanjazzmuseum.org. And those membership contributions really help keep us afloat as well.
Excellent. Another question, different museum, but I know that you guys enjoy a lovely relationship and share an atrium with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So the question is about that, or more of a comment. Imagine you're thrilled that the Negro League Baseball Museum, that the Major League Baseball is finally including the Negro Leagues baseball stats, which I think is,
yeah.
And I think Bob Kendrick would go deeper on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that was a big deal, like just a couple of years ago, really. That's
yeah, it's an honor to be next to an organization such as the Negro League Baseball Museum, and to be able to compliment them as they compliment us with the musical side of African American history and heritage, and just kind of working together. There's always a lot of interesting energy in this space.
Yes, absolutely. Does the museum have programs supporting young and upcoming musicians?
Yes, we do. Diana, are you asking these questions, or are the viewers asking these questions? Because they got some good questions.
Somebody didn't tell me, I swear.
Okay, yeah. So we do. I'm glad you asked that. Our premier educational program here is the Kansas City Jazz Academy. That is for junior high to high school age students who want to expand and increase their knowledge and performance ability in jazz. We have several ensembles within that program, and it's a really, really low cost for the actual tuition. And we actually sponsor and provide scholarships for many of the students there. And it's hugely successful. We just had our end of the year concert here in the atrium space, and it was packed, fully attended, and we really turn out some great students that learn a lot and go on to do other things in music. So that would be our prized educational program that's open to the public. We also have jazz storytelling, which occurs on the first Friday of every month. This is more geared towards preschool, elementary, homeschool children who have the ability to have their parents or teachers or educators bring them to the Jazz Museum on a Friday morning at 10 a.m. We have Miss Lisa Henry, who leads a group of musicians in walking the children through different elements of jazz and song and games through song and jazz and dance. And it's very educational and entertaining. So those are our two top educational programs outside of the research facilities and opportunities that we provide here in our collections department.
Yeah, I've seen some of the jazz storytelling pictures on your website, and I kind of wish I was in preschool because those look like a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the energy of the kids and Miss Lisa and everybody and Brother John singing. So yes, for sure.
All right, another question: is there any exhibit featuring Pat Metheny, who is from your area, one of the greatest guitar players ever?
No, there is not. But you know, we're going through a process of expanding the exhibit because, as you saw, the exhibit is based on four jazz masters uh, who are more previous and not contemporary. And we're looking to really include that story in the next iteration of the Jazz Museum. However, he does have a gold medallion on 18th Street, which is where our Jazz Walk of Fame is at. And we have him honored there along with people like Charlie Parker, Bobby Watson, and many jazz greats. So Mr. Metheny is definitely honored there.
Well, that kind of leads into another question that someone asked us to please talk a bit about the ongoing efforts to build up the collection. And by the way, they say excellent tour.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Um, well, you know, a museum is usually always an ongoing effort to add to the collections. We are actually in the process of sorting through what we already have. During the past few years, we've had a lot of transitions with some of the staff and just trying to keep things collected together. We have a really good collections team right now that is in charge of documenting everything, categorizing and arranging things in their proper order. So we're still going through what we have. So they actually had put a halt to receiving things because we couldn't store any more stuff. So we do have a little bit of a backlog of that. But if you're ever interested or know someone who's interested in contributing to the collection or loaning something, you can contact us at the American Jazz Museum via the same website, which is americanjazzmuseum.org, and reach out to the collections department.
Outstanding. Yeah, that's something that you should always make an ask for because you never know what is out there, what people have collected over the years. And we get to this point, this is an AARP pitch here. We get to this point where we need to downsize and declutter. And you've got this amazing stuff that your kids don't want, but would be fabulous for like the Jazz Museum. And so please think about that. Anyway, next question. Looked on your website, could not find a virtual tour. Any chance of you making one available? Now, I know AARP will make this one available on us, but do you have like a standard kind of virtual tour that you guys have on your website?
I am the tour. This is it. This is it. Us and AARP, this is how you got to catch it. So if you don't see it, as Diane mentioned, we do they do house them through their platforms. We don't have one on our actual website. We do have a Google cultural institutions tour. So if you go to Google and type in virtual tour of the Jazz Museum, there is not a guided tour like I just presented to you, but you can kind of move through the exhibits kind of through clicks and scrolls, which isn't always the best thing. It's always good to have a person talking.
Absolutely, and you did a great job with that, as several people have said in Q&A. And something we can kind of talk about a little bit is we are going to do another one of these later on in the year. We just haven't set a date yet.
Right. We do have another one coming up, so I'm sure Diane will be getting that information out to all of the members, and you know, hopefully we can get some more going because this seems to be a good thing for us. I like the partnership. I enjoy talking to you all.
Well, we have a good time watching you walk through the museum, and every time I learn something new and different. It always seems like you throw something new in every time, so that's always good. Next question. My partner and I are traveling west from the Finger Lakes in New York and plan on stopping by both museums. Are there any concerts or performances scheduled for February or March?
February and March, there's always something going on. I don't know what we have on the calendar as of this point. I would recommend the Blue Room, however. The Blue Room concerts are Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays. As I mentioned earlier, we have a Monday jam session that starts at about 5 o'clock and goes to about 9 o'clock. And then we have on Friday and Saturday our regular jazz and jam sessions, but they're actually headlined by artists that our entertainment director brings in. So Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays, you're sure to catch a great show at the Blue Room.
Now, will the Jazz at Noons be continuing next year as well, or is that still up in the air?
I am not sure of how we're going to be executing those this year because we've had some reprioritizing and rearranging. But I do believe they have some schedule. I just don't know the dates on those yet. And our website should, in the next month or so, have a more comprehensive calendar.
Okay, great, great. All right. Next question, which is not a question. No question, just kudos to the tour and excellent camera work. It's difficult to smoothly track someone moving. Thank you. Yeah, big camera guy, JD, who
Okay.
gotten really better and better, and the lighting was good as well. So thanks very much for that.
I've got about, I think we can do one more because then we've got the walking tour piece too. So I can answer these all day. Don't get me stuck on the conversation because I'll answer them all day.
Okay. I've heard you talk a lot about Local 627 and the American Federation of Musicians Unions. Can you give just a snippet more of the history of that? I've heard people talk about that over the years, but I think that is a really fascinating piece of Kansas City history.
Yeah. The Mutual Musicians Foundation, as I mentioned in the Blue Room portion of the tour, was originally the Musicians Local 627, part of the American Federation of Musicians. It was founded March 2nd, 1917, during a time where Jim Crow was definitely being executed, not only in the South, but in parts of the Midwest, just wasn't as prominent here. So Local 627 was developed to give the Black musicians an opportunity to have fair representation when it came to their business practices, getting scale pay, getting adequately placed for gigs, getting proper payment for leading bands, contract disputes and negotiations. It always helped them. However, interesting part about that is that even with the representation within Local 627, there was still segregation within the musicians union. So the Black musicians were rarely paid as much as the white musicians. And at times they were totally discounted, but at least they did have some type of apparatus to have a representation. It continued in that form until 1972, when they desegregated or started to enact and enforce the desegregation laws on a state and local level, which means desegregating the unions. So Local 627 then merged with Local 34. Once that happened, the musicians that were members of Local 627 decided to keep the building as a place that can function as a fellowship gathering hall for the musicians outside of official business. An interesting story is that the white union, Local 34, actually made it one of the caveats that in order for Local 627 to join with their union, they would have to part with their building to the larger union. The Black musicians didn't agree with that. They didn't want to do that. So they kept the building, and the force that they used to actually help the merger occur was the fact that they illustrated the point that although the business is being handled at Local 34, all of the talent is at Local 627. So that was their bargaining tool.
All right. Two quick questions that just popped up. Number one, do you play an instrument yourself? And is there anything going on at the Juke House?
I'm a vocalist and composer, and I blend the styles of jazz and hip hop. So I'm more of the contemporary new school, and I play keys. But when I say I play keys, I'm important to say who I say that in front of, because playing keys and really playing like the musicians that you see at the foundation is two different things.
Anything going on at the Juke House?
Oh yeah, the Juke House is Thursday through Sunday, as a matter of fact, now, because they have a Thursday night, Friday night, a Saturday night, and they have a brunch on Sundays. So they're open 4 nights a week. Great little jazz and blues club, but it leans a little more towards the blues side of things. Great food and great drinks, of course. So,
All right. Well, that covers all the questions. Those are some great questions. I
all
think
right,
that's
yeah,
from our audience that we have had so far. But now I think you're going to take us on a little tour.
yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and go outside into the 18th Vine District, so you can kind of get a little understanding and view of where the American Jazz Museum is actually situated in this community, and then we'll make our way to the Mutual Musicians Foundation. So, are you ready for that, Diane?
I'm sorry, I was ready for you to roll that tour. Right?
So, I'm going to transition here. Just pardon me for a second while I bring on our walking tour, and I'll see you guys on the other side. All right. Do you have my screen up?
Yes, we do. But James, if you're talking, I don't hear you.
You'll see here we're at the intersection of 18th and Vine. Can you hear me?
Now I can.
All right. This is the historic Lincoln Building, which was known to house many of the Black professionals in Kansas City, such as doctors, lawyers, carpenters, furniture makers. That was the main building that they housed their businesses. And right across here from that, you have the Blue Room, which we were in earlier. This is our functioning jazz club that is also a part of the Jazz Museum exhibit. And it is located right across the Lincoln Building in that historic intersection known as 18th and Vine. As we make our way up, you'll see on the sidewalk we have the medallions that I was referring to that are the Jazz Walk of Fame medallions, where Pat Metheny actually has a medallion as well. As we continue up the street, you'll see the famous Gym Theater, where we have a lot of our jazz concerts, different performances and recitals. Opened in 1913 originally as the Star Theater, and then renamed the Gym Theater in 1921. Here you see some of our Jazz Walk of Fame inductees. We actually have Jazz Walk of Fame, and we'll be honoring 2 more jazz musicians. And that is done by JDRC, the Jazz District Redevelopment Corporation, which is led by Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver and his nonprofit organization. The Gym Theater is also where we host some of our more known, more well-known concerts like Jamming at the Gym, which is an annual series that takes place about 4 times a year.
And I hate to tell you this, James, but we have lost your video feed.
Oh, you lost the video?
Did.
Okay, hold on here.
This is the joys of live performance.
Oh gosh. Yeah, as
James is outside in the 18th and Vine district. Yeah, the video has dropped from the signal, so we are trying to pick that back up again. It may take a second to get us back going again. But James is in the process of going across from the Jazz Museum itself to the Mutual Musicians Foundation, which is where the musicians are waiting to provide us with some live jazz. So we definitely want to wait for him to get across the street. And it seems like I have dropped James in both parts now.
I got you here. I'm just getting this video back up for you.
Okay, good. I was starting to feel a little bit lonesome there for a second because I thought I was all by myself. Not that I can't talk all by myself, but James is infinitely more interesting and has a lot more to offer on jazz. My only jazz story is when I was 13 years old, my parents took us on a family trip to New Orleans and left a 13-year-old alone in a hotel room so that they could go see Dexter Gordon in a club that I was not allowed to go into. There's my story. So while you're working on the video part, James, someone has put another question in there, and I don't know if you can do both at the same time. They are looking for some names of lesser known jazz musicians that they could look up, people that are worth looking up that may not be highlighters. I know you had a lot on that wall of fame in Kansas City that might not have been as mainstream popular. And James may be a little bit too busy to answer questions as he is trying to deal with the technical piece. Oh, there's James. You're still on mute, dude.
I got you. I think we're back up here. I'm going to go ahead and get this back up, and I will be able to answer that question.
Okay. As you can see, James is outside, and it's a beautiful day here in Kansas City. So, in case you were looking for a weather report for Kansas,
And I gotta be enabled as that host again to go ahead and show them the rest of that 18th Street Park.
Hang on one second, and we'll do that for you. All right, I lost you, James. Where'd you go?
I'm still here, just waiting to share the video.
All right. All right, you should be enabled all over the place. There he goes.
All right. And am I back on with the audio?
You are.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. It's just a transition thing and trying to get it going here. But I was bringing us in front of the Gym Theater, and then right across from the Gym Theater is where we have the actual museums at 18th and Vine, which house the American Jazz Museum and the Negro League Baseball Museum. And someone mentioned the Juke House earlier. We make our way up to the next corner here, which is right here on 18th and Highland. Oh, I'm sorry. Which is right here on 18th and Highland. That is where you have the Juke House. And that was asked about, but as I said, the Juke House open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday Great entertainment, great music and food, and just a good time in there. And these are all on 18th Street. So if you're headed east to west down 18th Street, that is where you will find the American Jazz Museum, the Blue Room, the Gym Theater, the Lincoln Building, the Negro League Baseball Museum, the Juke House, and then as soon as you turn the corner to go to the north is where you see the Black Archives, which is this limestone structure that you see directly behind the church as we continue to move north. And that is where the Black Archives of Mid-America is hosted. And that is the organization, as I mentioned earlier, that was founded by the late Horace Peterson III in the visitor center that is named after him. Had one of our historic churches in the 18th and Vine area during its heyday. You probably had about 10 churches. We have at this time 4 churches within a 1 block radius. So meaning 1 square block. So we pretty much have a church on every corner. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring us into the Mutual Musicians Foundation. I'm going to go back to my live feed on my camera here, Diane.
Okay.
This is directly up Highland. And as we approach 18th and Highland, that's where we'll find the Mutual Musicians Foundation. And that is where I'm at in front of now. So appreciate you all for bearing with us through that technical piece. It's always something with the technical side of things and these gadgets that we deal with to be able to do these virtual tours. But I am here at the Mutual Musicians Foundation, which is located at 1823 Highland Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri, right here in the historic 18th and Vine area. I'm going to go ahead and change my view there so you guys can get a better view. I did mention that interesting story about Charlie Parker and his residence in Kansas City as a boy. So this number behind me is a tax assessment number for a property that was located at 15th and Olive in Kansas City, Missouri. A little bit of well-known or sometimes unwell-known history about Kansas City is that during Prohibition, it was a wide open town, which was considered to be a place where all vices could take place, especially alcohol and women, anything that was a vice. And it was another reason why jazz was able to thrive here, because during Prohibition in the United States, Kansas City being an open town had plenty of bars, brothels, saloons, speakeasies, so to speak, to be able to afford to have all these musicians. And that's another reason why they flocked here. But Tom Pendergast, who was the political boss at the time for the Democratic Party, was just, let's say, known to be a more capitalistic motivated person, as a morally motivated person. So there was so much corruption during the time of his reign as a political powerhouse in Kansas City that when he went to jail in 1939 and 1940, they had to reassess all of the property in Jackson County, Missouri, to make sure they knew who the property belonged to on a legal basis. So all of the houses and properties and establishments were assigned tax assessment numbers, and this is the tax assessment number for Charlie Parker's boyhood home that was on 15th. So just a little fun fact with that, and one of the things that makes Kansas City such a interesting place and a place where jazz could really thrive and develop. So we're going to go into the Mutual Musicians Foundation, and of course, this is going to be something that's an experience that really you can experience virtually, but we would love to have you in person to come down for one of our jam sessions. So I'm going to give a brief transition here, and then we'll be upstairs to see the musicians and hear some music.
You know I can't abide the silence, so we're headed up into the Mutual Musicians Foundation. Got the camera on. We're waiting. There's James kind of sneaking in.
All right. Are we there on audio?
There we go. I hear you. Okay, JD, you're muted on JD, but yeah, JD, you need to unmute.
Microphone on.
Yeah, now I hear you. I
Okay,
hear
he hears me. Okay, we've got audio now. Yeah.
Yay.
So welcome to the Mutual Musicians Foundation. As I mentioned earlier, was founded March 2nd, 1917 here in Kansas City, Missouri. We are in the reception area of the building. It was originally formed and built as a 6-unit apartment complex in 1904. So it's a 120-year-old building, and the organization has been here since 1917. So there's a lot of rich history and culture here that has been passed down from generation to generation. Behind me, we have our famous panoramic picture taken by J.E. Miller Studios on May 4th, 1930. This was a historic battle of the bands that was being performed as a fundraiser for the musicians to do renovations to the building. In this picture, you see a young Benny Moten, Bus Moten, and Count Basie as a young man in their band right here. As we enter into the main reception area, this was the original place where musicians would host their social gatherings with family, friends, and other musicians to be able to have a place to fellowship. It currently functions as a bar and piano room for our late night jam sessions, which occur on Friday and Saturday, 1:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. But you'll notice on the wall, we have the timeline mural, which actually turns the building into a living museum because it documents the history, and we also practice the legacy and the skills that brought it to prominence, which was music and cultivating musicians as they progress and help them to develop. All African-American musicians based in Kansas City, Missouri had to be members of Local 627 in order to get what they considered well-paying scale jobs that were on the actual books, where you had protections through the union. So that would include people like Georgie Lee, Jay McShann, Ben Kennard, Eddie Saunders, Pearl Fuston, Mary Lou Williams. All of those musicians would have had to be members and at one time grace these union halls. And we still have a replica, or I'm sorry, not a replica, it's not a replica, it's now an authentic banner from one of our early Local 627 parade banners that we keep here at the Mutual Musicians Foundation. Most of our archived photographs are housed at UMKC at the Labuddy Special Collections Department. And they have a really great collection there, and they help us to really preserve those items, which includes about 1,000 original photographs of jazz musicians and the different social and musical events that they produced. Before we get started and go to the musicians, which are waiting on me to get to them, I'll give you one view of the second floor of the Mutual Musicians Foundation. This was historically where the business of the musicians was actually conducted, which was on the second floor. So the public usually was not allowed on the second floor. Public events were the first floor, private business events for the members or the union members were on the second floor. It now functions as the performance hall that we use during our late night jam sessions. So on every Friday and Saturday, when we open at 1:30, we'll have a quartet of members from the Mutual Musicians Foundation that host the jam session. If you're a musician, you're welcome to come and play and sit in. The only rule is they're going to keep it real with you. And if you're not up to par, they're going to let you know and ask you to go practice and come back when you can hang a little bit better.
And we'll have those dates up soon for the next one, and we'll make sure we get that technical piece worked out. Sorry that you guys didn't get to experience that, but we'll have it up again.
Well, big thanks to you and to JD on camera and to the musicians for turning out. And thank all of you for signing on for the tour. We're going to do another virtual tour of the museum coming up later this year, so please stay tuned for that. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Any final words?
See you soon.
All right.
Nope, I hope to see you soon. All right.